Hello everyone, and welcome to this microlearning module on trauma-informed approaches, created especially for out-of-school time professionals like you who work with students and their families in 21st Century Community Learning Centers, 21st CCLCs. Anyone who works closely with students would agree that experiencing trauma can make it hard for a person to learn, regardless of how well a lesson or activity is implemented. Rather than diagnose students, our goal as educators is to recognize signs that a student might have been impacted by a traumatic event. Every 21st CCLC professional can help to create a supportive, safe, and positive environment to help students navigate the effects of trauma in their lives. Let's take Travis as an example. Travis is a 9-year-old fourth grader. He seems to love his instructors and is usually excited to come into the program and see his friends. But at times, out of nowhere, he gets very frustrated, screams out loud at his friends, refuses to follow directions, and destroys activity materials. On one of those days, Travis mentions that he's tired and says he's often home alone at night and worries about his mom until she gets home. He also shares that his father sometimes drinks alcohol and yells mean names at his mother, and sometimes even hits her. If you believe you may be the first adult to recognize the impacts of trauma in a student, it's always important to defer to your organizational policies and procedures before you take any action to intervene. But knowledge is power. So here's what you can do right away to help Travis and other students like him. You first need to understand key elements of trauma that may impact student behavior. Let's begin with stress and what stress could look like in your students. Stress is simply defined as a physical and emotional response to a stimulus. There are different types of stress, and not all stress is bad, but let's focus on toxic stress, which has negative effects. So, what are some possible symptoms of stress you may see in a student? Stress can look different depending on the individual, but some common signs of stress in children are frequent headaches, back or chest pain, heart palpitations, and upset stomach. They might show obvious signs of a poor night's sleep. You may also see emotional symptoms like sadness, anger, irritability, anxiety, or trouble with focusing. When stress escalates, the student might be dealing with some type of trauma. Trauma involves an event or events where death or serious injury to a child or their loved one is a real threat or is perceived as a real possibility. Other psychological dynamics that make a child feel unsafe at home or elsewhere can have similar impacts. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are stressful or traumatic events that include different forms of abuse or neglect. It's important to be aware of the different types of trauma and the effects adverse childhood experiences can have on children. ACEs can include abuse, whether physical, emotional, or sexual. Often some combination occurs together. Physical or emotional neglect, like not having enough food or being left home alone for extended periods. Other kinds of challenges, like witnessing violence, having a parent with an untreated mental illness or a drug or alcohol problem, or experiencing disruption due to homelessness, a contentious separation between parents, or having a family member in jail. In the 1990s, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and Kaiser Permanente conducted what's now known as the ACE study. This was one of the largest investigations of childhood trauma and its connection to overall well-being into adulthood. The doctors who conducted the study found that 61% of adults had experienced at least one ACE, and 16% had experienced 4 or more types of ACEs. Women and several racial and ethnic minority groups were more likely to fall in the 16%. In addition to causing learning challenges and behavior problems during childhood, trauma can have significant and varied long-term impacts. It can affect cognition, the ability to think clearly, physical health, emotional regulation, relationships with other people, mental health, behavior, and brain development. In 2018, the research team of Copeland, Shanahan, and Hinesley found that participants who experienced trauma in childhood were significantly more likely than their untraumatized peers to develop depression, substance use, or health problems, and to struggle financially or be involved in violent relationships. Trauma physically affects the nervous system and brain. One branch of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, or ANS, controls our response to threats. The ANS is divided into the sympathetic nervous system, or SNS, and the parasympathetic nervous system, or PNS. The SNS controls our fight or flight response, with reactions such as dilating our pupils, inhibiting the flow of saliva, and accelerating our heart rate when we're faced with a threatening event. The PNS, on the other hand, stimulates the flow of saliva and is involved in slowing the heart rate. All mammals have a prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain involved in recognizing and reacting to pain. However, the human prefrontal cortex is larger in size and has more subdivisions to handle complex functions such as planning ahead, multitasking, abstract thinking, recall, empathy, and most of what we consider distinctly human qualities. While other mammals don't have the neurological wiring to connect pain with factors such as emotional experiences or prior traumatic incidents, humans are at a distinct disadvantage. We are the only species capable of vividly reimagining and thus re-experiencing stressful traumatic events. Students who demonstrate explosive outbursts or emotional volatility out of proportion to actual events may very well have experienced trauma. Rather than responding to what is happening currently, these students may be living with a stress system in a chronic state of fight or flight. Now let's get specific about what you can do to support students like Travis who've experienced trauma. Though you can't magically make these students' challenges go away, you can be one of several protective factors. Protective factors are characteristics, conditions, or events that promote healthy development and reduce the risk that a person will experience trauma. Research shows that the strongest protective factor linked with resilience against childhood trauma is the reliable presence of a sensitive, nurturing, and responsive adult. The presence of such a figure can help children by restoring a sense of safety, predictability, and control, providing them with a way to process traumatic events, protecting them from re-traumatization, supporting their development of self-regulation, and helping them heal. You can see why it's critical for 21st CCLC professionals to understand the negative effects of trauma on their students' lives. A trauma-informed approach provides program staff with the knowledge, tools, and support they need to respond appropriately to student behavior. This approach helps students feel safe, calms the flight or fight response, and models healthy ways to handle difficult situations and emotions. When programs use trauma-informed approaches and strategies, they're doing vital work that can make a tremendous difference in the lives of students like Travis, both now and into adulthood. Be sure to check out our other tools and podcasts on this topic to help you put your new knowledge into action. The references cited in this presentation are Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University, no date, What are ACEs and how do they relate to toxic stress? Available at https://wp-content/uploads/2018/08/ACEs infographic _080218.pdf. Copeland, W.E., Shanahan, L., Hinesley, J., Chan, R.F., Aberg, K.A., Fairbank, J.A., Vandenoord, E.J., C.G., and Costello, E.J. 2018. Association of Childhood Trauma Exposure with Adult Psychiatric Disorders and Functional Outcomes. JAMA Network Open. Volume 1, Issue 7. Reference number E184493. Available at https://.org/10.1010open/JAMA-network-open.2018.4493 and Felitti V.J., Anda R.F., Nordenberg D., Williamson D.F., Spitz A.M., Edwards V., Koss M. P., and Marks J.S., 1998. Relationship of childhood abuse and household dysfunction to many of the leading causes of death in adults. The Adverse Childhood Experiences, ACE Study. American Journal of Preventative Medicine, Volume 14, pages 245 through 258, https://doi.org/10.1016/S0749-3797, open parentheses, 98, close parentheses, 00017-8.